into the best in true crime podcasting. This is True Crime Tuesday. I'm your host, Tim Dennis. Good show today, folks. Got an old friend with us today. Alan is with us today. There's a great book out there called Pen and Blood, Conversations with Killers. We've been having a killer conversation before this. We are not getting into what we were talking about before we started this program, because that's a killer conversation in itself. But the book is a great one. We, again, got a triple threat in with us today. Not only is he a terrific author, not only is he one of the best radio and podcast hosts out in the game, but also he's a TV star. And he's going to hate me for saying that. So yeah. You see, I've got him up already, and he's already said, yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't heard House of Mystery or tuned into House of Mystery, you need to. We have a link in the description of this program. But he's also got some TV shows that he'll be appearing on, not only this year, but in the new year. Alan, you want me to go through them? I will, if you want me to.
You better, because I'm not.
Well, I can if you'd like me to. I was going to bring up the old bio. Would you like me to, or I could skip it? It's up to you.
Hey, you're the chief.
Well, if I'm the chief, I may do so, because you've got you had a couple of shows actually that are coming up here in the new year that are interesting. I know you told me about a project you have coming up, which I don't know if you want to mention it or not.
What, dancing?
No, the book project, which
the Manson one.
Yeah.
No, that's great. I don't mind talking about that. That will be by far my best book I've done since I've been alive.
Yeah, I'm telling you that. Well, I'm looking forward to that one too. But we're talking about Pen and Blood, Conversations with Killers today, so we'll stay on that one. But we'll talk about that maybe at the end of the program here.
Sure.
The TV projects that Alan's been involved with include CNN Lies, Crimes, and Videos Season 4, which his best-selling true crime books in Canada include Beyond Suspicion, The True Crime of Colonel Russell Williams. That was featured on CNN's Lies, Crimes, and Videos Season 4. Murder Times 6, The True Story of the Wellsgrayparkmurders. Also is one of those books as well. In America, his bestsellers include The Killing Game. Serial killer Rodney Alcala was featured on several television shows, such as Very Scary People with Donnie Wahlberg, Oxygen's Mark of a Killer, Reels' Killer Trophies, and soon to be included in a 4-part Sundance Channel documentary called Death's Date. His bestseller Doomsday Cults, The Devil's Hostages, was featured on Vice's Dark Side of the 90s, which I believe plays every other day on Vice, right?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, yep. So you can see Alan pretty much on television nonstop.
Yeah.
No.
The dating death one, they had to powder my forehead because it was too shiny.
I've had that issue too on Paranormal Night Shift.
See, and they'd never had that before, where the director cut in the middle of it and then sent over the makeup person, and she started puffing my head.
I think they powdered me mid-season, but it was actually mid-shoot. They came in with the extra powder because I'm very shiny.
It's kind of embarrassing. I should have wore a hat. That's what I should have done. But they wouldn't have allowed that.
No, they'll never let you wear a hat. No.
No, I know. That's too bad.
I don't think it's professional.
I'm not going to get a hairpiece. I'm just not.
I went that route when I was very young.
No.
Don't do it. Yeah. No,
really?
Yeah, it's horrible.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah. And the only reason I did it was because the receptionist was very cute. And yeah, it was my mistake. Actually, I was allergic to the glue that they put the hairpiece on with, and I broke out.
Oh. Is that receptionist? Was that the girl you were talking about before we got on air?
No, that was not her.
Just thought I'd ask. I just
no.
seemed so fond of her that I thought maybe.
No, it wasn't her. No.
Yeah. I was going to say the hairpiece must have worked, right?
No, I wouldn't have needed the glue if that was her. Um,
Oh,
oh, see what I
uh,
did there, Alan? The
yeah.
joke. No one will ever know the joke except for the two of us, and that's the wonder of that conversation.
Well, they can feel free to email me and I'll give them the
You'll divulge the entire conversation.
yeah, I'll give it all away.
Oh, good, good,
Yeah.
good. That's
I'll write it in my next book.
yeah, oh, good. Yeah, that's because that'll be the most interesting thing about the Manson book will be our conversation
Yeah.
because that'll be more sick than anything Manson ever did.
Yeah, probably.
I'm sure.
Hmm.
Well, speaking of sick, blood and pen. See, do you like the
Yeah, nice lead in.
um I do have to tip my cap to you because I found Blood and Pen to be very, very intriguing, very interesting. The format of this book is very interesting. The fact that um, not only do you set it up with the stories, but then we're going to letters from these particular killers. There's three different killers in this book, and that we're getting an insight into the minds of these killers, and then they're writing back to particular people, and some of the minds of these guys are twisted. uh Give me, if you will, Alan, the setup as to why get the letters from these guys, and why give us that look into the just the psychosis of these different gentlemen.
Well, the idea is because I've done a lot of interviews with a lot of people in prison for murder, and some live and some just letters. And I started noticing some similarities between certain ones, even though the killers were in different countries and they had sort of a different, I don't know, how would you say, a different style of doing what they did and a different thing they were going after. They still had some of the same issues that were very similar to each other. So I thought about doing it in lines of like that. So, you kind of got three different killers that have done different scenarios, different setups, but yet they were really much the same person trying to do the same thing in their mind. And I think that was really kind of what I was thinking of. I was just trying to get people to look at uh, the way they see and what a killer is trying to do in a lot of cases, especially a serial killer, is not how we see it as more average citizens. Like we look into it and go, oh, how could someone do that? Or why do they do this? Or what would make them do this? And it's not like I'm saying I know what would make them do this, but it's just about becoming aware of how their mind thinks. And it's not as straightforward as what a lot of people think it is.
what what is it that we perceive they think of killing as?
Well, I think a lot of people out there who don't partake in killing, they're just like out living their lives, and they see a lot of these television shows like lies, crimes, and behavior, like all these things. And you see short clippets, and all they do is they show you this killer, and he goes through whatever he's done, like he kills three or four people or whatever in the end. And from usually most of these broadcasts, they're showing it to you in a way of like this guy was out to get his mother. His mother was angry and was a terrible person and beat him. So then now he's killing people that look like his mother. And that's kind of how they leave it. Do you know what I mean? Like you don't get much more than that. Or the father was a drunk and the father used to beat him. And so then he goes out in response to that and kills a pile of people. And they don't give you much more than that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I thought that's kind of so for a person watching that, they're just thinking, well, in order to be a killer, you have to be, a bad childhood. You get beat up or you get, sexually assaulted or you get, you know what I mean? So everyone likes to have it clean cut. Okay. As a kid, this happened to him. This is why he does this. Then they move on. They don't think about it more. But when you talk or communicate with these people, you start to realize that that's only the surface stuff. That's only a little bit because, and this is why there's thousands of people out there that had just as bad or even a worse life growing up as a lot of these killers did, but they don't live a life where they're hurting people. So that's what the big question is. You know, that's like, why
Right.
do some people do it and why do not others? And you know, I'm not a professional, psychiatrist, doctored and all that stuff, and can go into it, but so I can't tell you that, but I can tell you how they act and react off the camera, off the killing game, so to speak, when they're just being who they are. And I think that's kind of what I was trying to show people.
I think too the perception for the average person is from what we get from television, what we get from media, what we get from film, we get from other places, is that the average serial killer is either this mastermind, this genius who takes their time and they deduce who it is that they're going to kill. They either that or it's this animalistic urge, right? That they it's this seething, overwhelming urge that they need to go out and they have to do it right now, and they can't control themselves, right?
Right.
And I think from reading Pen and Blood, Conversations with Killers, um, you find that sometimes it's just, you know what, the opportunity was there, it just happened.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you look at them too, like when you look at people like Ian Brady being one of them, Ian Brady was the closest you'd get to that type of killer you're describing, you know, the Hannibal, the cannibal, sort of like the real educated, well-read, smart person, you know, and he's sitting there and he's, you know, all planned and skilled. He's the closest to that kind of intelligence. But even that, when you look at him and you look at the murders he committed, he wasn't smart or good at it all. It was nothing like that. But he was a well-read, educated man. So you know, that in itself shows you that that's not true.
Yeah. Ian Brady was he was interesting only in the respect that I guess to me he did have somewhat of a plan. He tried to put together somewhat of a plan, but even then it was kind of rough shot, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, he used to like he did that. Like he had this idea of okay, so he took down him and Myrahindley, sat down and he made her write out all the rules to
Yeah.
their killing. So this is how we're going to do it. And and yeah, that's well thought out. That's what I mean. He had the intelligence, the wherewithal, and all that. But the problem is when you come to a killer and what they're doing in killing and assaulting people, like in their case, was they needed to solve something, resolve something of their own life, their own issues. So the rules only go as far as they can. Like you can make this the rule and the plan. This is what we're going to do, how we're going to do it. You know, we'll have a change of clothes. We'll have, you know, they have all these ideas about what they're doing, and that's great. But when you get into doing it, it never goes as planned, and mistakes are made because your urge is much stronger than the need to have control where you plan it all out. And that's a big change because if you were going to televise their murders, you know, you would have these really smart Hannibal type people with all these plans and ideas. But when they actually went out and did it, the passion for the murder kind of really ruled what went on. And so that kind of throws that away.
He and Myra have kind of a weird relationship in that it seems like they're not quite Bonnie and Clyde, but they're at the same time as they go along in their spree. Who feeds off of who? Does she feed off of him or does he feed off of her? What? How do you? How would you sum up their relationship?
Well, you know, it's more of a need. Um, you see, because the biggest thing that, and it certainly wasn't talked about in the 60s when they were performing most of their murders, the Morse murders, as people know them, the main part. But Ian Brady had the need to be with men. He was homosexual and he liked younger men, a lot of times minors. And Myrahindley was the same. She liked girls. She was a lesbian, as we would call her now. Not necessarily for young girls, but their sexual proclivity was for the same sex. They coupled up with the need and desire to help each other achieve that. And it was so bad even when you go back to the 60s and you look at the news broadcasts and you read the paper, they didn't talk about that. It was just too dirty for the 60s. They didn't in fact they even left it. They let people think that he was raping the girls and killing them. And that's not what happened. He would they would lure their target for each other. Like she would go out and lure young boys, get them in the car, and they'd go for a drive, and he would follow them, and then he would sexually assault and kill the boy out in the moors, which is a big field and bush, and and they did the same either way. So in their need was because they understood each other. They both had the need. So that's why they weren't quite like Bonnie and Clyde because they weren't like the ultimate lovers. They weren't like in love, so to speak, with each other. They were in love with the idea of they found someone that was just like them and they both wanted to do the same thing and they could help each other do that. That was their relationship.
Yet at the end, as they're writing each other in prison, Myra is saying that she misses him, but in a weird kind of way. What do you suppose that is? Just the camaraderie? It's just the, is it the I miss having you around. I miss doing this weird thing we used to do together. How do you suppose that is?
Well, yeah, but it's like when you get your ultimate friends,
Mhm.
whether they're the same sex or not, and just when you have a really good friend, someone that they're over at your house, your apartment, you could just hang out and be yourself. You're not worried about your hair or the clothes you're wearing or what you say because you are totally one with that person in the sense you guys just get each other. You know what I mean? 100%.
Mm.
And that's something that that comfort was really important for each of them. And you got to remember, we're talking in the 60s. This is when things were prim and proper. Do you know? So to find someone that not only was, let's say, same-sex orientated, but to also be that way in a sexual assault murder sort of system. Just think about the rarity of that. you
Yeah.
know and in those times, like how would you even bring that up, because these are the times where you'd be dressed up when you're taking a girl out on a date, show up at the house and give her some roses and you take her someplace, and you know what I mean, like it's just that formality was incredible. It's not like you would say, hey babe, you want to go out and kill someone today?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like it was so I think there was it's an ultimate comfort. She found in him what she never found in anybody else. And it wasn't about the lover sexuality sort of thing. It was about he really understood her because he was the same. He had the same urges and feelings and the same desires as she did. They really got each other. And I guess when you get a comfort like that, that kind of companionship, you'll never replace, in a lifetime. So I think it was more that than anything, because at the same time when she's writing him, she's having an affair with one of her guards, right?
Hmm. Yep.
And the guard tried to break her out of prison and got caught, and then the guard ended up in prison, and she got another 10 years or something like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, so it wasn't really a sexual thing. She just really, and she probably missed also what they did. They were having a really good time. And I don't mean to sound callous about it, but this was like the ultimate. They were living their life that they wanted to, and it was really exciting, and they were, you know what I mean? So it's just there was a lot to miss.
Yeah. Yeah. I suppose it was a thrilling lifestyle, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
even though she claimed she had found God, it was a thrilling lifestyle. So I suppose she's being pulled in different directions, right?
Yeah, yeah, and finding God in a prison seems to be a natural occurrence for at
Yeah.
least a
Yeah.
third of them. And how much do they really find? Like what kind of God are they really finding? Is it just someone, is it the God that forgives them and so they feel like they are okay and they're gonna, you know what I mean? Like you have to wonder. It almost seems like an item a lot of times when you talk to these prisoners that have found God. It's not like someone that's really born again, or you know what I mean? It's not, you can tell there's just not that. They
Well,
seem like the same person, only they, I don't know, it's hard to explain.
it's prison chic, isn't it? It's a way to kind of knock a little time off and get paroled,
Yeah,
right?
it certainly helps.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
found God. I think that'll probably get me out of here.
Yeah,
You know.
yeah. You go and I've found God, Jesus, or whatever you say,
Mhm.
and you even can get a priest or a minister, like the one guy I did the interviews, he had that show up. It's just, um, I don't know. I'm not downplaying belief in God, or I'm not downplaying what she thought or said, but I just, I always take that with a big grain of salt.
What I want to add to, I'm just going to pull this from the book real quick. Add to one of the points you had brought up before. Brady wasn't your typical serial killer in many ways. He didn't indulge in animal cruelty. It was pointed out in the trial. Uh, Directly from the book, Pen and Blood, 100% of sexual homicide offenders examined had a history of cruelty towards animals. This is what the according to it was a long held belief of the National Sheriff's Association that if a person was harming an animal, there was a good possibility that it would lead to a person hurting a human. Police had seen this pattern for years and were primarily responsible for adding it to the FBI's database. The Michigan State University, which had a study on animal cruelty, reported these findings, and this is what they had reported. They reported that 100% of sexual homicide offenders examined had a history of cruelty towards animals. 70% of all animal abusers had committed at least one other criminal offense, and almost 40% have committed violent crimes against people. They also reported that 63.3% of men who had committed crimes of aggression admitted to cruelty to animals. They said that 48% of rapists and 30% of child molesters reported committing animal abuse during childhood or adolescence. They said that 36% of assaultive women reported cruelty to animals, while 0% of non assaultive women did. 25% of violent incarcerated men reported higher rates of substantial cruelty to animals in childhood than a comparison group of non incarcerated men, which is 0%. And men who abused animals were 5 times more likely to be arrested for violence towards humans, 4 times more likely to commit property crimes, and 3 times more likely to have records for drugs and disorderly conduct offenses. Now, keep that in mind when you say that Brady's insistence was that he was an animal lover.
Well,
And
that's in Pen and Blood. Boy, I have to get that book.
yeah, you'll have to check that out. Um, and he denied, by the way, that you know he wasn't your typical serial killer. He wait a minute, I didn't go dissecting animals, and I didn't go doing all this stuff.
Right, right.
You
And
know.
I found that to be an important point in what I'm saying is because like we see so many things on televisions and shows about these stories about homicides and stuff, and we just sort of assume, oh yeah, they always start out if they're when they're young, they're going to hurt animals. They'll be hurting a dog or a cat or whatever. And that's just not the case.
Mhm.
I mean, it happens, but he's a perfect example.
Yeah, indeed. Tell you what, Alan, let's take our break. When we come back, I want to talk about Stephenport. You want to talk about a very interesting part of this book. You really got in depth with the letters from him. And I want to talk a little bit about the inside look of Stephenport and his back and forth correspondence with the particular person in this book and how laissez-faire casual he is about where he's staying. I want to talk a little bit about the switches that turn off with him and his demeanor because I find it almost a little unnerving as I was reading it. I want to talk to you a little bit about Stephenport and what your impressions are when it came to him, and whether you think he was living in a fantasy land when it came to what he had done. I mean, denial just ain't a river in Egypt, right? I think there's a lot going on with this guy that you did a wonderful job of fleshing out in this book. And there's a lot more to come here. The book is a brilliant one, folks, and I encourage you to go get it. We have a link in the description of this program. Pen and Blood, Conversations with Killers. We'll talk more with Alan Warren coming up next, right here on the best in true crime podcasting. This is True Crime Tuesday. Welcome back to the best in true crime podcasting. This is True Crime Tuesday. I'm your host, Tim Dennis. My guest is Alan Warren. The book is Pen and Blood, Conversations with Killers. It's a good one. We got a link in the description of this program so you can go get it for yourself. Now, Alan, before the break, we were talking about the fact that the book is separated not only by the stories of these three different killers, but also by the correspondence that they have with people outside of prison. And one of the more unnerving ones is stephenport, the Grindr serial killer. The correspondence that you managed to get a hold of and publish from stephenport is, I found to be unnerving. I don't know why I find it to be unnerving, but I do. And he mentions kind of over and over again, it's very repetitive, but it's almost like he's away at summer camp, right?
Yeah.
And he's talking about his love of Star Wars and Doctor Who and his favorite foods that he likes to get from the canteen, and he keeps asking this person for money. And then it becomes, well, when I get out, will you be my boyfriend?
Yeah. So are you interested?
Yeah. That's fine. I got other things to do.
Yeah.
But it's plus, I don't want to die by a drug death. You know, there's that little danger. And that's the other thing about these letters is at one point he states, well, you can't kill anybody by GHB. Huh?
He was a case. One thing is, he reminds me of something like someone that's 12 years old. He's in prison for murdering, 4 or 5 people and all these other things. And his biggest concern is the new Star Wars movie coming out.
Yeah.
Like, or seeing a new poster of a movie and talking about, like, he's like a kid at home who's looking at TV and looking through books or magazines and just go, oh my God, can you see this? Can you see that? Or the newest toy from some Avengers. And you're like, wow, okay, so that's all you're concerned about? Not
For
that you've been a murderer? And you know what I mean? Like, he reminded me of a kid, and his
yeah.
priorities were toys and movies and Star Wars and fantasy, and all of that stuff was his number one priority.
At one point he's chasing down for 6 months, he's chasing down the Star Wars annual, which is a comic book. And he has the person on the outside send it to him, but then he doesn't get it because jail officials get it. And then I think his sister ends up sending it to him directly from Amazon. So he's happy. So then it got to him directly. And I'm like,
Yeah,
that's your focus?
yeah,
A
that's
Star
all.
Wars annual?
It's almost like I said, it's like a kid at home. He's like, you could be communicating with him, and he's just some young teenager at home, and that's the same kind of conversations you're getting from him. I mean, you can get him into other conversations and talk to him about, the murders, or being, what he did as a job and stuff like that. You can get into all those, and he will talk about it, but that's not what he talks about himself. Like that, you have to initiate that conversation, get it going. And because in general, all he wants to talk about is sci-fi and fantasy stuff. It's his craziest thing. He's worried about these things or getting the latest book or magazine or poster, and yet he's sent away for life. You know what I mean? It's kind of bizarre. To me, it is anyway. I found that
Oh,
very strange.
and
Yeah.
then he takes the delusion one step higher, Alan. And that's, when I get out of here, I'm going to work for like the Princess Trust, or I'm going to work for a charity, and I'm going to help people with problems with drugs, and I'm going to get them off of drugs.
Yeah,
You're the guy pumping people full of drugs and killing them.
exactly. It just it's crazy, isn't it? Like he thinks that, well, he wants to tell himself that he never killed any of them. You know what I'm saying? He wants to believe that they did it to themselves. And then he can kind of move on from there and kind of continue our life and get out of prison, and he's going to help people and be a nurse, it was one of the strangest cases I've ever seen because he was really devious in the sense of, he had it all planned. And I think he was more devious than Brady in that way because he knew exactly how he would kill his victims. And it was a little different than Brady. And plus he was more specific because he was working. It's really strange because he was working in there's I don't know if you've talked about that or you do on the podcast. There's the kind of different P and P they call it, party and play,
Mhm.
and that's kind of a gay male gay party scene, and a lot of times everybody goes in to a place, a location, and they lock the doors, and then everyone does drugs and has sex, and then they're free to go, so to speak, after that. So I'm trying to be very subtle about it. I don't want to get
Sure.
into,
Oh,
and
you
there's
don't.
different variations on that too, because there's ones where they get in and they have to remove all their clothes and they're naked in a big hall or something. And he was the guy that would sell the drugs to everyone. So he would be one of the people that you'd go to. Like instead of going to a bar and getting a drink, you go to him and he gives you the drugs. And in this place, he did that. So he knew his way around drugs, let's just say.
And I mean, it's a casual scene, and that's understood. And but still, and there's a certain amount of, I don't want to say non-responsibility. I mean, there's responsibility for yourself. I get that. And there's responsibility, there should be for others, a little bit of responsibility, because even though you have a partner you're hooking up with, you should be kind of like, well, we're looking to be safe with each other, right? At the time that you're with each other. Is that a a fair thing to say?
In some cases, some of these parties are pretty extreme, and there's a lot of drugs in use, which causes a lot of different activities to happen that wouldn't necessarily happen. You know what? I'm just saying these parties vary. There's
Yeah.
ones mild to wild. You get into some of these and they're fairly mild and they're sort of like what you're saying. And then there's some of them that are just big throwdown orgies.
But there's a mutual understanding, right?
Of course.
Both
Oh
parties
yeah.
know
Yeah.
where they're going, right?
Yeah. Like this is not a catch and assault. This
Right.
is everyone's there for the same reason.
Exactly.
And even why they call it party and play is because they're going to party as in use the drugs and then play. So they know what this is. This is not any secret. Like they're not like, oh, let's go to you know, this club. I hear it's fun, and then we lock the door and all have our way with you. It's not that. You know what a party and play party is.
But
So
there's a line there. Even as two responsible adults, Alan, there's a
right.
line there that you can cross. And Stephen Port was crossing that line. He was overstepping that line every single time.
Oh yeah, yeah. Of
It's not like
course.
there was a gray area that you could go, oh, well, maybe we're not reading the room correctly.
Yeah.
He was way overstepping that bounds every single time.
Yeah, because he needed to take control of his victim. Um, he wasn't as aggressive out front as like Ian Brady was. Um, he wasn't as he didn't have that authority around him in his behavior. So he would seduce them in by with drugs, and he would make sure that they were too high to handle themselves.
Yeah.
And even if he took them home, then he would inject them with things like, GHB and things like that, which would paralyze them. And then he would tie them up and do what he wanted to them and then kill them and dump them in the park. So, yeah, this was not a normal behavior by any means. And I have to say that a lot of his victims were not people that he got at the party and place scene. Sometimes it was outside of that. They were just people he would meet online. Grindr was the app that he used mostly.
Mhm.
There was a few other ones in there. They're listed in the book, but that's why he got known as the Grindr serial killer, because that was the most common app that he used to get them back to his place. So what he was doing for a living just proves how well he knew drugs. He knew how to use them. He knew what they did, and he sold them, and he worked the party scene and all that stuff like that. So it wasn't like an accidental thing.
Yeah.
you know
Yeah.
that's which he tried to make it sound like, oh, it's just their fault, they take too much, or they do. He was trying to make it that way, and that's not how it went down.
And and again, it's that thing where he's treating people like they're disposable, and they're not. These are people with loved ones, lives, you know, and people that mean something. And that's the thing. It's treating people like they're disposable. And that's the despicable thing about this is treating and this is the thing that irks me. This is the thing that's disgusting to me is the, you know, is just running through people like fast food containers, right? And then
Right.
leaving them like garbage in a park. Sometimes he'd leave them half naked in a park.
Yeah, yeah.
You
He
know?
started trying to make them look like they were doing drugs, and they overdosed. They were just sitting in the park and they shot up and died. That
Yeah,
was kind of, his cover up and stuff. But he started making mistakes, because there was one person that never used drugs, needles, or any of that stuff, that worked at a hardware store like Home Depot, and that sort of kind of threw that guy's sisters, and kind of going, "There's something going on here. This is not him." And then they started, and that's kind of where it all fell apart for him. But yeah, yeah, they were just I don't know what you call it. It was just disposable. You're right. That's just, there was no feeling toward it at all.
yeah, yeah. And it's the sad part of it.
And you see even the pictures that he drew on his letters. Do you see those? It's just like a kid, eh?
Yeah,
It was like cartoons. Like he was just like you would just, like I said, you just feel like he's a 12, 13-year old.
yeah,
It was the strangest thing. And yet he was almost 40 by then, and he was on, you see that too, he was on that the Greatest Chef program in the UK version,
yeah,
where they
yeah.
have the competitions, and for everybody cooks something, and he was
Well, and he even there's even a point where he talks about who's going to play him in a movie, which
yeah.
come on.
But he's living in that novelty world. Do you really, if you think about it, is it really that far off of how people live? Like, especially like when you go on social media and stuff and TikTok, people are stars in their own little way.
Yeah.
And he's kind of that way. Like, oh, who would play him in a movie, and he's got an image of him being a nurse, and he's just, I don't know. It's like
But
it's
he very much thinks like a 13-year-old, right? I mean,
yeah,
I'm gonna everything is Doctor Who, it's Star Wars, it's if I were in a movie, who would play me in a movie? It's very teenage culture. It's and nothing is he eats a lot of fast food snacks from the canteen. You know, he's it's like he hasn't advanced past a certain age, you know.
Yeah, he hasn't, and I don't know if he will really. I think in that way that childhood is lost. I don't know if it'll, or the I shouldn't, the young adulthood sort of thing. He's just gone from child to adult murderer, and he's back to child again. I don't know. I wished we could have a psychiatrist see some of these people, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And and then you don't want to say youthful optimism at the end of it, but when I get out of here, I just want a normal life. I just want to, he ends up doing I just want to have a boyfriend. I just want to, have a normal life where I can settle down and, and I want to help people and help humanity. Well, you can't do that, right? You can't just wish things away and hope that everything's going to be great. That's not how it works.
Yeah, and I found the irony like in the letter where he describes because he was a male prostitute as well
Yeah,
at
that's the other
times.
thing. And it's almost like, okay, I think I can go back to that life, but it can be okay because I can be safe.
Yeah.
You can't have it both ways, right?
And he gives lessons where he describes on
Yeah.
how to do it safely, how to and what you should never do. Never take drugs from, a John, a guy buying you for sex, because you never know what's in him. Meanwhile, he's drugging people to have
Yeah.
sex and kill. You know what I mean? Like the irony in what he knew was right and wrong, and then he's telling you how not to behave as a male hooker, what
Right.
not to do. It was just crazy. He would tell in his letters everything to not do so that you don't get killed and assaulted while being a prostitute, and yet he was doing it in real life.
Bizarre.
Yeah, it's the strangest thing. But that's what I mean by when you get the letters or when you talk to the people that live the life, you can find out so much about them, how they lived and why they lived and stuff like that. And it's just not always this scene that's displayed in programs, in crime programs. It's not that simple.
Yeah.
There's a lot more to the lifestyles of people that are doing this, so to speak.
Yeah. Uh, let's in just the maybe 10 minutes we have here or so left in the program, let's talk a little bit about David Shearing, the Wells Gray Park murderer. This case is an interesting case in that you have essentially a burned out car with, I believe it's 6 people in it, 4 adults, 2 children. And it turns out the gentleman in the car that is reported missing from his job. And he's never missed a day of work. Um, and he's been gone now for up to a week. He's called in as missing. It's reported that people are suspicious of David Shearing, um, and eventually police kind of swarm in. Is it that and I don't quite remember here, Alan. Maybe you can help fill in the gaps here. Uh, how it is that is it he's pulled over along with 2 others, and that
Oh,
they
there were several things that tied him to the murders, and it wasn't immediate. And even when the police were kind of onto him, they couldn't make the arrest until they had enough evidence. And you're right, because the bodies were burned so badly, and we're talking the 1980s, DNA was tough. Like it wasn't like it is now, and there wasn't DNA, so to speak, but it was just really tough for them to determine what happened to them. Do you know what I'm saying? Other than there was a bullet in with the ashes and stuff, so they can kind of guess. And they had to kind of go by what he had told people, and people had been around him was. And yeah, when he got pulled over the once, they were going to shoot the cop. They had a lot of, throughout the story, you start to understand that he's not the best character. And they did eventually catch him, um, which is very, you know, it's a good thing. But what drew me to that story was because he was up for parole. And just to show you his lifestyle, because he had remarried since he was in prison. He'd found Jesus, you know. Um, he was now a stepfather of two girls who were young, like the ones he had sexually assaulted and killed. And so there's a lot of, it was very complex again, the life story of what was going on. And so speaking to him in person is different than letters, but it's the same idea. You know, you start to assemble how they lived and what went on in their lives and how this became a new lifestyle for them, you know, and stuff. So that's still a very questionable case too, um, of how he did it and why he did it, because you have to rely on his story for the
Right.
most, right? And the evidence is lacking, so you kind of have to go by what it's all kind of circumstantial and his story's changed a few times.
Because initially he tells police he kills all of them in the camp at one time, and then after he pleads out, he then admits to the lead investigator that no, I killed the adults, and then I lured the two girls into a tent where I sexually assaulted them.
Yeah, I actually took them back to his house.
I'm sorry, took them back to his
He
houses.
took them back to his house, and then he had them for we didn't know how long. And initially, it was thought up to about 2 weeks before he had killed them. But what he had told me, with the one girl, she didn't last a day, because he didn't like the way she performed. How that's I'm trying to be as polite as possible. He didn't like her, how little she knew sexually. She was too
They,
young.
they
So
were only
he just, yeah, I know. It's just, so he just shot her in the head.
they were only 13 and 11, weren't they?
Yeah, that's right. And that was the 11-year-old. She was too young. She didn't know what she was doing. And he tried to show her several times over the first day, but she just didn't get it. So he decided, well, I'll just shoot her in the head. So that was his move. And then he kept the 13-year-old for about 2 weeks, and before he killed her and had sex with her. And so yeah, so this is kind of it, you know, and when you hear these things from the person themselves, again, you have to take it with a little bit of a grain of salt, because a lot of times when killers are talking to you or anything, they even sending letters, like you even see that in the letter, they're asking for things. They're manipulating. They need money in their commissary, you know,
Mm-hmm.
so they can buy something. There's always that. So there's this give and take. So you always have to keep in the back of the mind, um, how much is real and how much isn't, because the more they get to talk to you and the more they have you around, the more they're getting. So there's always something else they need to tell you, you know? So that's kind of, I think, the hardest part in talking with them, besides the content, of course, of some of the stuff they say. But when I do it, I was really trying to put together their day-to-day life. What is that person's life like? They get up in the morning, and how do they live, and what goes on in their life? And that's before and up to now when they're in prison. Because I think it gives you a little bit better of an understanding of who they are. Again, it's not the total answer, but a little bit closer.
So my question would be to you then, Alan, because even the lead investigator in the case says he thinks some of this might be just salacious conjecture and wishful thinking. Some of it may be reality. Um, how much do you think is one and how much is the other?
Oh, I don't know if I could put a number on that, because that was Eastman, that Sergeant Eastman, and he's right. Because again, it's about them and their attention and what they're trying to get from you. So they tell you the story that they need to tell you. Sometimes it's wrong, and sometimes it's just told you because they know that that's what you want to hear. So, you know what I mean? And without the proper evidence, it's a really big question. Um, in his particular case, I don't know how, I don't think he was as, see, but then that's different. For me, he wasn't as, let's say, salacious. He wasn't in the same frame as he was back 40 years ago when he was doing it with Eastman, the sergeant. Do you know
Okay.
what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Back then too, he had between him and the sergeant, there was a kind of like almost like you see on a detective movie. There was a back and forth. There was a challenge between the two. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
They were struggling for dominance, so to speak. They were both back and forth with each other and trying to be who's in control. So, there was very much. So what he told and said to Sergeant Eastman in the 80s was totally different than in the 2020s because
Could
there's
be
a different world now.
could be argued though, once a pedophile, always a pedophile, and maybe the fact that he has two daughters now could.
Oh, totally. I mean, and that's a whole other chapter in that book because when I had to go meet her, and you have to kind of try to figure out what's going on in someone's mind to marry someone who's in prison for life that had sexually assaulted two girls and killed them, and you have two girls from another relationship and you're bringing them into that relationship with that. You know what I mean? You have to, that's a whole other world. And why? And is that what you think? Is it that she's maybe doing it on purpose or, it's really hard to read these things. Um, yeah, it's a strange world sometimes.
Very strange.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of those Twilight Zone endings that you just you,
Well,
you
yeah, because there's no rational explanation. There isn't. You
know,
can't. You can say what you want, like she said, well, he's found God and he's fine and he's got a good soul and all that. You can say that till the cows come home, wasn't that saying? But you know what? I, if you were in that place, could you honestly say that and believe that about someone? Do you know what I mean? That's done all of this in his
I
life.
I
I,
would I would not. There's so much, and this isn't wishful thinking, or this isn't just my opinion. There's scientific proof that once you've committed pedophilia, or you're a serial pedophiliac, is that a term? You don't go back.
yeah.
You don't go back. That is in your nature. You don't go
Yeah.
back.
Well,
So
yeah.
you shouldn't be getting into a relationship with him because he doesn't want you. He's there for a reason.
Right. And that would be a natural assumption. And even if and the idea that you get into a relationship with someone, okay, so that's as an adult, that's your choice, right?
Mm,
If Tim Dennis finds this killer woman who's been in prison for killing several people, and you want to marry her in prison and start a relationship, that's for you because you're an adult.
yeah.
That's your choice. But to bring your children into it, I think that's where the mistake is,
Yes.
right? I mean, if she kept them totally separate, or do you know what I mean? That's where you're making a decision as a parent because you're in charge of these children and you're sort of deciding what's best for them, or you should be. And that's where the question is, because it doesn't matter how you feel. You can feel whatever. You can feel love for the guy, and you can think that, yeah, he sure talks the scriptures well. He's really into Jesus and all this, and he's a good man and all that. And that's okay if it's you, because that's you decide it and you believe that and you're an adult. But I have a struggle when you bring children into it,
Yes. Yeah.
you
Very
know.
much so. Very much so. Once you've had children, your life is not your own.
Yeah. I mean, so then I don't like that. I don't agree with that. I think that's where you draw the line. But it's out of my hands. All I can do is report the stories and leave it at that, because I can't. But I think that's the mistake there in that case.
That's right. That's very much right, my friend. Very much right. Well, the book is fascinating, folks, and I encourage you to go get your copy. We have a link in the description of this program. It's called Pen and Blood, Conversations with Killers. Alan Warren is our guest and the author of that book. Alan, I want to thank you so much for being with us again on the program.
Yeah, I can't wait to buy the book.
I know, right? I mean, you should own a copy of all people.
I'm
And
excited.
before we leave you today, tell us about you have a project about Manson coming up.
Yeah, I've been working on that for years, and I've got a lot of interviews I've done, even with ex Manson followers and stuff. And I've got there's two books. There's one that gives you all the interviews, and it's going to give you the every single person that was part of the family, a part of the murders, in good or bad, all the whole group. But what it does is it's a really good reference. It gives you who they were, where they grew up, kind of what their life was about when they ran into Manson, and it kind of gives you the full detail on that, and plus the interviews. So that's getting to know the characters, the players, as you will. The second book, which is just going to be called Man's Son, is the story from Manson's beginning to the end. And there's a lot of storyline to it. There's a lot of stuff and conversations between people and stuff. So it's put together. I'm really, really happy with this. I'm really excited about this book. I think like I said, I think it's the best work I've done in my whole life.
Wow. Is there a release date yet for the first one?
The first one should be out by the end of summer here, August, late August, early September, and the other one will be out for Christmas. Now, that wasn't staged or planned. It was just the timing of how it worked. But the other one will be out for Christmas. But like I said, I'm really excited about it because I really think the work is really good, and it's very, very detailed. There's a lot of information. At the same time, there's a really good storyline with it. And it's not, you see, because I look at it from this way. I'll tell you one thing. When I take a story like that, you look at the character, but there's also everything else going on around the US at the time. Okay. See, because Charles Manson could have only been who he was and did what he did at that particular time in the US and in San Francisco and LA. Like, he could have only, like, you know what I mean? Any other time, it wouldn't have worked. It just wouldn't have happened. And so what I've got in there is there's a lot of explanation of the things that were going on. Like, there's the Weathermen Underground that were blowing up buildings every day and stuff. There's all of these things that were happening in LA, and they all revolve around each other. And it's really important to understand, because then you can understand more why some of these people acted and reacted the way they did, or why they fell into Manson's lifestyle, so to speak. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it all fits together. There's so much involved in it, but I think it's very interesting. It's a really good study about the 60s in that part of the world.
Incredibly interesting. Looking forward to it. So we'll have you back, and we'll talk Manson.
We'll talk old Manson.
Exactly. Alan Warren, I want to thank you so much for being with us today.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
For more audio and video archives of True Crime Tuesday, intriguing content, and cool swag, check out darknessradioshow.com. The executive producer of True Crime Tuesday is Troy Palmer. If you enjoyed today's program, make sure you like and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Be sure you join us tomorrow for Supernatural News with Mally Fox.